Do you agree with her economic proposals?
I do, because I think what has happened over the past 3 years, there has been improvement. There's an improvement in wages, though some people are not seeing it because these kinds of things, I think, take a long time to happen.
Well, it's not breaking news to tell you that the country's pretty divided on this election. It's incredibly close. We're seeing numbers in these battleground states that are within a half a percentage point right now, and we still got 5 weeks to go. Wasn't like this at all in 2020 or in 2016. It's razor thin. And as we look at how this election is progressing, I think it's fair to examine the thought process of those who are voting differently than you and I might vote. And we have an opportunity to look into the responses and thought process of a typical Kamala Harris voter in Pennsylvania. Take a look at this.
She's just wonderful. Her ideas, she's smart, and I'm all for her.
Do you agree with her economic proposals?
I do, because I think what has happened over the past 3 years, there has been improvement. There's an improvement in wages, though some people are not seeing it because these kinds of things, I think, take a long time to happen.
Okay, Akash, I found that to be incredibly enlightening, actually, because as she, verged into, she said her ideas, and then without giving examples of them, she just sort of paused and then said, and she's smart, but without giving examples of that, she just sort of paused and then moved on. I don't know, but I think that this is sort of typical of most of the people who are voting for Kamala Harris right now, because that's what the campaign is giving them to go on. There's not a whole lot of specifics. It's just sort of a gut feeling. What do you think?
Yeah, she seems like a very nice lady, this person that was interviewed here, but I think she's doing, to your point, exactly what the Harris campaign hopes Democratic voters do, which is just sort of glom onto Vice President Harris whatever they want to, which is just sort of run-of-the-mill progressive ideologies and policies and criticisms of Republicans and things like that. I mean, that is essentially the 1 inch deep situation in the Harris campaign. That's what she's done. That's what appeals to Democratic voters. And frankly, I think they're basically hoping it appeals to just enough swing voters, or kind of tricks just enough swing voters to put her over the top in Pennsylvania and win her the election. And frankly, as we've discussed, Larry, that might work. I mean, we can criticize Vice President Harris and say that she doesn't know what she's doing, and these voters are dumb and making a mistake. I don't think that really helps us. I think pointing out the fact that she actually has no ideas to improve the lives of the American people is something we need to continue to hammer home for exactly somebody like this voter who clearly cares and is engaged and is hoping for the best, but really is not getting anything that she thinks she is with Vice President Harris.
Well, I agree. And I think that's the biggest point here, especially that last thing she said about, the economic policies are really good. It's just going to take a while for these to take hold. Akash, at AFP, you guys have been leading the charge for, 2 decades now on economic policies that don't take a long time. It's not true. You can actually turn things around pretty quickly with the right policies, right direction, and right leadership. And so I think that there's an opening here to actually win some votes.
Look at President Trump's track record in the first term after those tax cuts. Those tax cuts were signed at the end of 2017. 2018, 2019 saw enormous wage growth for people at all income levels, all races, all over the country. The average family saved almost $2,000 thanks to those tax cuts. Obviously, corporations were investing and creating jobs. I mean, that obviously happened very, very quickly, as did during this administration the inflation crisis after the trillions in additional spending. Neither of those things took years, and they were completely divergent paths.
That's a great point. The negative side doesn't take very long to have repercussions. Chris DeGaulle, I remember 2 days after the 2016 election, when Donald Trump was declared the winner, the stock market went on a rally for 2 months before he was even inaugurated. Wasn't it fascinating to hear this kind of thought process from a Harris voter?
I'm going to say something as a toxic masculine man, and I know we're a panel of men, so brace yourselves, everyone. There is something odd, and I don't know what it is yet, and I hope it's studied someday. Women of a certain generation, older white ladies like that lady who, as Akash said, I'm sure is a lovely, nice person, and then the young Gen Z / millennial white woman in the suburbs. These two opposite ends of the white lady spectrum have this singular obsession, I believe, with abortion And I don't think they're talking about or thinking about anything else. That lady comes from like a Jane Fonda bra burning era. She still thinks it's the 60s, I promise you. And she doesn't care or know anything about Kamala Harris or what she stands for. She's just been convinced, like if you saw the old lady crying all over Kamala Harris recently when she went through the store, there's this generation of older white ladies that think, it's Jane Fonda on a tank and we're burning bras. And then similarly, there are the younger women that think it's all about abortion. Somewhere in between are the rest of the normal women who are feeling the effects of costs and feeling insecure about their communities. I think they're outliers. I just don't, I'm sure she's very nice. I just think these women are so blinded with this reproductive freedom argument. That's all they can think about.
Do you think it is that issue, or do you think it's also more about, Kamala Harris, although they have been running on the abortion issue, certainly, she's also running on sort of injecting this feeling, this mood, this sort of very surface, but I'm not discounting it because people vote based on their feelings. And I think it might be having an impact, actually. She just makes me feel better. And those same women you just described, they don't tend to like Donald Trump because of the same thing, personality and feelings-oriented aspects.
We just had the head pollster from Rasmussen on this week, and he confirmed that, in fact, this issue of abortion is still the number one issue for the bulk of voters in a state where you can kill babies right up to the 11th hour, just like Ralph Northam wants to. So it's limitless abortion in Pennsylvania. That's what's so bizarre. Like the fact that that is still a winning message in a state where it's completely legal, well beyond when it should be. I think any human being who's decent understands that. I will say, yes, she has sold the vapid, empty, insincere, emotional argument to a lot of women who are voting on that single issue. We'll just see if the men, on the other hand, are going to be the counter to that. And I will be very interested to see when all the votes are counted where the men go. We think black men are going hard in the direction of Trump, as well as most white men. So we'll see.
It's not just how men will vote, it's how the women in those men's lives will allow them to vote. Let's be clear here. Foldy, Stigall is name-checking your generation here. Why don't you take that ball and run with it if you could? But also, the bigger question here after that video is, what are Harris voters thinking, I guess? And I'm not asking in a pejorative way.
Well, I am obviously not a Gen Z woman. But I do think it was interesting. Props to this woman who was being interviewed for giving reasons for voting for Kamala Harris that did not include the words Donald Trump. It's actually that's hard to do sometimes. And I actually thought at first that this was a clip of Stephanie Ruhle walking off the set after she interviewed Kamala Harris, because this woman is saying the exact same things that you see journalists say about Kamala Harris. Journalists, allegedly. These are propagandists, obviously, about how Harris has actually no policies, but that's a good thing. And that, the vagueness will both help her win and potentially help her govern. And I think this is the main problem that Harris will have in the home stretch of this election, which is that this voter said some of her ideas and policies, to the extent she has them, will take time. Yeah. And Kamala Harris is running on turning the page and Brat Summer and all of these things. Okay, and what are you doing right now? And what have you done for the last 3.5 years? I would love for someone to publish her schedule as vice president. I would imagine that she spent more time at SoulCycle than doing vice presidential things. You've seen, like we just talked about, the administration trying to put her behind presidential podiums at a gun violence thing, talking with Zelensky, making people kind of imagine her as president. But think back to 2 years ago or something like that. What on earth was she doing? Probably nothing. So now she has to explain to people, yes, you have problems with my boss, but he also has said that I was involved in all of these decisions. Yeah. How are people going to rectify that between now and November? I don't think it's something that they've adequately answered.
Well, thank you. But for pointing that out, and I'll expand on a little bit more, Foldy, because I think there's another insight here, in that we shouldn't underestimate voters' ability to sort of talk themselves into their vote, even though they know better. 3 months ago, when Biden was, and it was only 3 months ago, guys, when Biden was still the nominee, the same message from the candidate and from a voter like that was, what are you talking about? We have the strongest economy on earth right now. Now, 3 months later, it's, well, the policies are there, but it takes a little while for them to take hold. This really is about voters sort of deciding, yeah, this is who I'm going to vote for, and I'll make it work no matter what I have to say to make it work.